Hi, my name is Adrienne Chenette, and I'm here today to talk to you about removing barriers to salmon recovery in California. And when I say removing barriers, I mean both in a metaphorical and literal sense. Oops. Sorry, let me move something around. First, let's talk about why salmon are so extraordinary. For over 6 million years, they've made this epic journey where they're born in cold freshwater streams, then they migrate out to the ocean, and then they return years later to reproduce in the same streams from which they originated. Since time immemorial, salmon have nourished numbers of indigenous tribes who have and continue to steward the land. Salmon remain deeply woven into their cultural identities and spiritual practices. Salmon migration is foundational to the ecosystems they inhabit. It's an exchange of beneficial nutrients from freshwater to the ocean and back to freshwater. And yet, salmon are in serious decline. Salmon numbers are so low that we're now entering into the third consecutive year of a closure on the commercial salmon harvest, a historic first under colonial fishery management. This decline is devastating not only to our ecosystem, but also to the economy. In California, salmon can generate $1.4 billion in revenue and 23,000 jobs. Why is this decline happening? One major reason is habitat loss. When salmon return from the ocean, they may swim hundreds or even thousands of miles to reach their spawning grounds, only to be blocked by dams that cut off access to cold water habitat that they need to successfully reproduce. Beyond blocking habitat, dams reduce water quality, contribute to harmful algal blooms, and increase prevalence of non-native species. The good news is we know removing dams helps. Here are two before and after photos from the largest dam removal project to date, completed just this past October, where 4 dams were removed on the Klamath River, restoring fish access to over 400 miles of river. In just the month following the removal of the last dam, an estimated 6,000 salmon migrated into their newly reopened habitat. This restoration project will have lasting benefits for the river, salmon, and surrounding communities. And we have plenty of opportunities to create more success stories like this, which brings me to my capstone. For my capstone, I address the following aspects of dam removals and dam mitigations. For feasibility, what are social, economic, and practical considerations for removing or modifying dams? Which ones can we actually remove? With regulations, what are the steps we can take to restore flows and water quality at dams that we can't remove due to beneficial uses? In other words, how can we leverage existing regulations to ensure flows and habitat for salmon? And through outreach, what steps can we take to share this with interested parties to increase pace and scale of river restoration across the state to promote salmon recovery? For feasibility considerations, according to the American Society for Civil Engineers, the public depends on dams for 70% of the state's water supply, 15% of power, as well as for flood control, recreation, fisheries, and wildlife habitat. So which dams can we remove without disrupting these critical services, and how can dam removal practitioners better coordinate their efforts? This past year, I was in a room with a suite of experts who are all working together on tracking, researching, and funding remediation of barriers to fish passage in California. One major need that they identified was a unified tool that compiles priority barrier removal lists from various agencies and organizations to help select strong project candidates for funding. This is a gap that I helped to fill by collaborating with American Rivers in the development of their California Active 150 tool. American Rivers is a national nonprofit working to protect and restore rivers to ensure clean water and healthy ecosystems for all. The Active 150 tool is a dynamic list of high priority dam removal projects and low-hanging fruit opportunities in California, created through partner feedback and feasibility analysis to elevate projects to funding and implementation. Over the next few slides, I'll walk through some of the considerations I factored in while supporting the initial development of this tool. First, California's dams are aging. Many were built in the early to mid 1900s and are now past their intended lifespan. Most dams were engineered to last only 50 years, and yet the average age of dams in California is 72. Many are obsolete or filled with sediment, reducing their ability to store water. The combination of aging infrastructure and extreme storm events pose serious safety concerns. In fact, California's dams received a C- in the 2019 American Society for Civil Engineers Infrastructure Report Card, mostly due to age and hazard level. Hazard level refers to the potential for catastrophic loss of life in the event of a dam failure. And the number of high hazard potential dams has more than doubled in 20 years as development steadily encroaches on our once rural dams and reservoirs. Removing outdated, unsafe dams helps reduce risk to downstream communities while restoring critical habitat. This map shows lines of river habitat once available to Central Valley salmon before massive dams were put in place, and a map of what remains today. These large dams, which were put in place to mitigate flooding and deliver water to other parts of the state, range in height from 100 to 600 feet, and they block access to over 90% of historical salmon habitat. The California commercial salmon fishery largely depends on Central Valley runs of salmon. Thinking about the extent of Central Valley's watershed area, here again is a map of those large dams, with an addition of all other kinds of in-stream barriers, shown as yellow dots. These barriers are less discussed, but are clearly more common and create just as much of an issue for freshwater fish migration. Statewide, California has over 5,000 confirmed in-stream barriers. People may also tend to focus on how we can't remove dams because they provide power, but in California, that represents less than 7% of all confirmed barriers. Also, in just over 200 of California's dams are 100 feet or higher, while nationwide, the average dam removal project are for dams that are just 10 feet in height, even when considering large projects like the Klamath Dam removals. Looking beyond large dams, we have thousands of opportunities to remediate barriers. And here are some screen captures from the Active 150 Tools dashboard of both prioritization of barriers and the draft Active 150 list. To arrive at this draft list, I assisted in outreach to land and water managers and conducted a desktop analysis of over 2,000 dams, reviewing data like barrier age, purpose, ownership, impacts to other species, hazard rating, and aerial imagery. Outreach to land managers revealed at least 25 previously undocumented barriers, demonstrating the importance of collaboration and outreach to identify more opportunities and fill in data gaps. We also identified 18 dams whose owners or managing entities are open to removal. And with American Rivers, I'm currently supporting further feasibility work for 15 of these dams, each one representing a meaningful opportunity for habitat restoration. And of the initial 150 identified, 90 are on salmon-bearing streams. It's exciting to see these geographic clusters with this active list, which creates a queue of both smaller, easier dam removals, as well as some complex, large-scale removals. Later this year, we'll be beta testing the tool with the California Fish Passage Forum, a collaborative partnership of federal, local, and nonprofit orgs dedicated to revitalizing anadromous fish populations through barrier remediation, coordination, and funding. A major challenge to dam removal is the gap in understanding social feasibility of dam removal, which I define as landowner, community, or societal support for such projects, considering the uses of a dam. To address this, I developed an interview approach and conducted a combination of one-on-one, semi-structured interviews and held conversations with land managers and dam owners to help identify what concerns they had around maintaining, modifying, or removing structures that are identified as barriers to salmon passage. A common issue raised by land managers from different regions stems from navigating California's Cutting the Green Tape initiative, which is meant to streamline restoration but is still fraught with permitting challenges, leaving land managers feeling like building developers instead of would-be restorationists. Even when dam removal is beneficial, regulatory and bureaucratic hurdles remain steep. And because not all dams can be removed due to the values they provide, regulations become key tools for restoring habitat conditions. My research focused on California Fish and Game Commission, which was the first wildlife conservation agency in the US. They're tasked with setting policies and regulations to help manage the state's fish, wildlife, their habitats, and their recreational and commercial uses. I keyed in on codes 5930 to 5942, which outline 3 primary strategies identified by the state for barrier mitigation. First, mandating a fishway, a structure to help fish get around dams, or 2, ensuring water releases from dams to support downstream conditions, or 3, trap and haul, which involves collecting and transporting fish above and below dams, like taxiing fish around the river. I reviewed available meeting minutes from other historical documents from the Fish and Game Commission archives, both physical and digital, from 1934 to 1970, to understand how these regulations were utilized by the Commission during California's major dam building era. And I compared them to the current status of those agreements today. What I found was minimal. Of the at least 650 dams built during this period, which is a low estimate, I found just 27 instances of formal discussion around flow or fish passage. Some examples include concerns for flows through Friant Dam on the San Joaquin River, which was first mentioned in 1958 with the following poignant quote from Commissioner Wente. The wiping out of this run of salmon in the San Joaquin was one of the greatest crimes perpetrated on the state of California. Updated restorative pulse flows were most recently implemented in April of this last year. For a dam on the Yuba River, dam owners agreed to trapping and hauling salmon back in 1962, but a pilot study for this effort wasn't implemented until this past January. Flow releases for a hydropower dam on the Kern River were first mentioned in 1962, and a flow agreement is currently in process this year. My main takeaway here is that there's clearly more opportunity for action to support environmental flows and fish passage. To extend the reach of this capstone effort, I presented the Active 150 tool to relevant groups at the National American Fisheries Society conference and to the California Fish Passage Forum. I also created a trifold pamphlet for dam owners who are interested in updating and modifying their dams to reduce liability, create fish passage, and still support their water irrigation needs. And by engaging with landowners and dam managers, we can identify concerns and considerations around potential projects to elevate more feasible projects, thereby increasing the pace and scale of dam removal and river restoration. And by identifying regulatory opportunities for enforcing supportive flows, we can enhance river conditions in areas where dam removal does not seem like a feasible option. All of this work brings us one step closer to the ultimate goal of more watersheds restored, more habitat connectivity, more climate resilience, and more salmon returns over time. In terms of next steps, I'm thrilled to share that over the course of this capstone, American Rivers hired me on full-time as the California Associate Director of Data Science and River Restoration, where I'm currently working on projects to support in-stream flow dedications for endangered fish, identifying further opportunities for barrier modification or removal, and continuing to refine the Active 150 tool for broader use. Finally, I'm so grateful to the Repass Rogers Fellowship for funding my master's research. And so much thanks goes to my Capstone team, whose varied backgrounds were pivotal in the success of this work, and to the Fish and Game Commission staff for sharing their office space with me and overall enthusiasm, to the CSP staff and my cohort for your months of encouragement and support, to Ann Willis and Ashley Overhouse, who helped get this all started, to Kat Hinkey for your knowledge and camaraderie, and to my sister for creating these sweet graphics.